everyone, and welcome to the Wrongfully Heard podcast. This is the Wrongfully Heard podcast.
And wrongfully convicted.
In this case, nobody got justice.
Was wrongly convicted of a miscarriage of justice. We found new scientific evidence proving her innocence.
Thank you for everyone joining today. This is episode 3 where we will be talking about the Ronald Cottons case. So first of all, I just want to say a big thank you to everyone for giving so much love over on my TikTok and on my other podcast videos on YouTube and Spotify. I'm very grateful for you all and I hope you are enjoying them so far. Today we are going to be covering one of the most important and groundbreaking wrongful conviction cases in history. This personally was one of the first ones that I uncovered during my degree at university, and this is Ronald Cottons. So before we get onto Ronald's story, I am going to put up all of the timestamps over here as per usual. Jennifer was in her apartment alone at 3 a.m. when someone smashed a light bulb outside and cut her telephone line. Jennifer called out asking who was there. The intruder came in and pinned Jennifer to her bed and threatened her with a knife. Jennifer tried to bribe the intruder with money, with things, but the intruder said that it only wants one thing, and that's when Jennifer knew what he was about to do. The intruder then sexually assaulted Jennifer. During this high stress and traumatic moment, Jennifer didn't cry, she didn't scream. Instead, she took this moment to study the intruder's face, his body, his height, his weight, all of those aspects, so that if she made it out alive, she could go to the police and give them a good testimony for them to find who did it. The intruder made a comment that he was thirsty, so Jennifer offered to go get him a drink in the kitchen. But instead of making the drink, she actually fled the apartment and went to a neighbor's house where they let her in and she called the police. When the intruder saw that Jennifer was gone, he actually moved to another house and raped another woman, and then he fled again. And the police actually found the intruder and were chasing him, but they eventually lost him as he went into the woods. Jennifer later that night went to the hospital and had to conduct a rape kit. And when she was at the hospital, Detective Mike Golden worked with Jennifer to create a composite sketch of the intruder. So Jennifer's description of the man was that he was in his early 20s. He had a thin mustache. His height was around 6 foot. His weight was around 170 to 175 pounds. With this very detailed description of the suspect, this composite sketch was released into the media. It did not take very long after this for people to be calling the police, giving ideas to who they thought this sketch was of. The police received a tip about a 22-year-old man named Ronald Cottons. Ronald Cottons lived somewhere close to where these crimes occurred. Ronald also had some prior criminal history of sexual assault and breaking and entering. The police asked Ronald to come down to the station to have a conversation, in which Ronald went down voluntarily as he believed that he didn't do the crime because he knew it. When at the police station, Ronald gave his alibi that he was at a motel with his girlfriend. Little did Ronald know that he actually mixed the weekends up, so the police viewed this as Ronald making a false statement and lying. His parents actually created a statement saying that he was at their home during that time on the couch, but this was the actual truth, what the parents were saying, but then the police didn't believe anything they were saying because they thought that the parents were covering up for Ronald. So the police believed that this was enough to bring Ronald in and bring him into custody. The day after the conversation with the police, Jennifer and the other victim were asked to come in the day after Ronald had the conversation with the police to do a eyewitness lineup. So they were instructed to pick out of, I think it was around 6 potential choices of photos of suspects, in which all of the other 5 suspects were just random people who looked similar, while the 6th one was Ronald Cotton. And Ronald was picked out by Jennifer, but the other victim did not pick Ronald. They picked one of the other people. About a week later, the victims were asked to come back to the police department to do a real life lineup. This time it consisted of 7 men. Jennifer once again picked Ronald Cotton out of the lineup. So now we're going to skip forward to the trial. So the prosecution's most compelling piece of evidence was the eyewitness testimony. Back in the 80s, eyewitness testimony was the most damning piece of evidence that you could use in court. If you look at a jury and you see the victim point out at the defendant and say, "This is the person that did this crime," it is very emotional, it's very believable, because that's what the victim believes. So for the jury, it is very hard to sway away from that and not view it as compelling evidence. Jennifer pointed out Ronald in the courtroom and said, "This is the man who raped me," in front of the jury. So back in the 80s, they didn't have any testing such as DNA or forensic testing. Some of the other prosecution planks were that a piece of foam was found in Jennifer's apartment. That foam seemed to match foam that was linked to a pair of shoes that Ronald had in his apartment. The other victim stated that the rapist had a flashlight during the time of the crime, and although it was not the same color flashlight, the prosecution used the flashlight that was found in Ronald's home. Ronald Cotton also had a knife that Jennifer testified that was the same knife that was used during the crime. So with all that evidence, after 40 minutes, the jury came to a guilty verdict and Ronald Cotton was sentenced to life in prison plus 50 years. This occurred on January 17th, 1985. Ronald was devastated, but during his time in prison, he decided to join things because he needed to fill up his time. So he joined the choir and he joined the kitchen staff. So one day, a new inmate came in and joined the kitchen staff as well, and Ronald thought he looked very familiar, so he asked him where he was from. The inmate stated that he was from Burlington. Ronald had a closer look at him and thought he looked very similar to the composite sketch that was drawn. So Ronald said, "I'm in prison for a crime I didn't commit. Did you commit this crime?" And the new inmate stated that he did not commit this crime. This inmate's name was Bobby Poole. Later on during his sentence, Ronald Cotton was talking to another inmate in which stated that Bobby Poole came up to him and said that he did commit the crime. So now Ronald Cotton went to his lawyer and said, "Is there anything that can clear my name? I think this guy did the crime." So a few years later, there was a big case going around at the time for the O.J. Simpson trial. And during that trial, there was this new scientific evidence called DNA, in which people could match DNA from a crime to a human being. So Ronald Cotton wanted to match Bobby Poole's DNA to the DNA found at the crime. And So they ran the DNA, and the DNA came back as positive with Bobby Poole's DNA. So a new trial was made, and Ronald was exonerated for the crime. So Ronald Cotton served 10.5 years in prison for a crime he did not commit. When Jennifer was told that Ronald Cotton did not commit this crime and it was actually Bobby Poole, she was devastated. She could not believe that she was the reason that someone served that long without their freedom. She was absolutely devastated and horrified. So she wanted to meet up with Ronald. So they met up at a church, and Ronald actually forgave Jennifer that day. Since this case, there has been a lot of research done around lineups and eyewitness identifications. So one piece of research that was done, one piece of evidence that was found was that sequential lineups were less likely to cause wrongful conviction than simultaneous. So a simultaneous lineup is when you have 6 photos lined up on a table and you have to pick from one of them. You can see all 6 at once and you have to identify which person did it. While a sequential lineup is when, say you have a deck of cards and they're the photos, you look at one at a time and you have to pick who did it. And you can't look at all of them at the same time. So in light of this new research, many police departments changed from simultaneous lineups to sequential lineups. Research also shows that it is best practice for the lineup to occur directly after the crime had occurred. But this is because if someone does a lineup a long time after the trial, memory can become contaminated like DNA can. So basically stuff like the media and news articles and police descriptions can all taint that image that you had at the start. So one singular lineup identification is all that is needed for prosecution's evidence. It's like in this case with Ronald Cotton. So when Jennifer was doing her first identification, she was not sure. She said, "I think this is the person who did it." But when you fast forward to the court date, when she was testifying, she said, "This is the man who raped me." So from going to unsure to certain, from the first time to the last time, you think you'd be more certain the first time rather than the last time. As she saw more photos of Ronald Cotton, her memory decided that instead of using the memory of that night, she just kept adding on the familiarity of seeing the photo of Ronald Cotton over and over and over again. It has also been researched that a lineup should be double-blind. So this means that while the eyewitness doesn't know who the police are targeting as a potential suspect, so shouldn't the person who is conducting the lineup. So the police officer or the detective in the room should also not know who is the suspect in this lineup. This would prevent officers from influencing eyewitness identification and inflating witness confidence. Research states that memory can be impacted greatly during times of high stress and trauma. Some people have no recollection after they have experienced a traumatic event, while some people remember everything. The body during these stressful times go into this response called the fight or flight response. So the body is just trying to survive and finding a way to survive rather than focusing on things such as memory. So memory is compromised in a time of fight or flight. Now, although I've talked about how there are many flaws in eyewitness testimony and eyewitness identification, it is important to note that the legal system could not function without eyewitness identification or testimony. Fast forwarding to now, Ronald Cotton and Jennifer are actually great friends and have wrote a book together called Picking Cotton. So this book is a great book. I recommend you read it. And yeah, this is the end of the episode. I hope you all enjoyed. Please let me know in the comments what case I should cover in the next couple weeks. Thank you for watching the Wrongfully Heard podcast, where we give voices to those who once were not heard.